Welcome to Concussion Talk Podcast. I'm Nick Mercer. This is episode 39, and I'm talking to Tim Vanderjeugd. Is that correct? Vanderjeugd?
Close enough.
And Harrison Brown, which is easier to say. They're both going to talk about the new TFR Track Factory Racing and HeadCheck Health partnership, and I'll get about this new in the mountain bike, mostly on the mountain biking team, but I'll get their mountain biking, their off-road team, and I'll get Harrison to talk about. First of all, tell us about HeadCheck Health and what it does, and we should already do so. If you want to check out episode 38 with Harrison, so he talks more about HeadCheck, and then I'll get Tim to discuss more about the cycling teams. So, Harrison, welcome back, and
thanks.
Could you talk about what HeadCheck is and what it does and why it's applicable to cycling teams?
Absolutely, yeah. So HeadCheck, we're a software company, and we also provide services to sports organizations. And really what we do is kind of twofold. The first one is we make a really practical solution for organizations to execute a concussion policy. And so what that means is that we give them tools that can be used on their phone or their computer that really make it very simple, really, to walk through their concussion protocols. And obviously what we do is we cater that to what's appropriate for the user. So if the person is not medical, it's really more of a recognize and remove and document situation. If they are medical, then we do give them the tools and tests that they would need to run. The second reason, I guess the second part of that is just really providing oversight on whether the policy is being followed. So we do provide almost like an audit tool for the organization to show, hey, did the policy get followed, and what are areas that we can help improve the safety for those athletes. And so the reason why it's applicable to folks like Trek and really any organization like that is I think in those sports there's really not much going on right now in terms of a pressure to follow policies and to execute them like there are in traditional sports like hockey or football. And so what we can do is we can come in and we can make it really simple for them to really take the lead in this area and be proactive about it. And we think that eventually all sports with risk of concussion will have to have something like this. And so hats off to the Trek group to do this proactively ahead of everybody else.
Well, great. Well, thanks. And now if you'll turn it over to Tim, who can tell us about basically what teams are using this software, this HeadCheck software and programs.
Well, thank you, Nick, and thank you for having us on the show. With the Trek teams and in specific then our off-road programs, meaning Track Factory Racing, cross country, enduro, and downhill, so 3 mountain bike disciplines there. We really wanted to do everything we can for our riders and their health and their safety. We are in quite a unique situation in that we own and manage all of our teams. So we have full control from A to Z. And we really thought that having a proper concussion protocol and basically taking care of the health of the riders' brains beyond, let's say, their legs is part of our responsibility as well. So we're very, very proud to partner up with HeadCheck. We were hoping, let's say, Harrison and I, that we didn't have to use the protocol, let's say, until late in the season or something. Unfortunately, it's only April, and we did have already one situation where we used it and it worked perfectly. So we can go into that, dive into that a little bit as well. But I just want to say that we're really happy and proud to partner up with HeadCheck.
Oh, thank you so much. And actually, I'll get now we've talked about it already, but I will get you to, just for the listeners, now. Please introduce yourself, Tim, and like where you are and what your role is with the team, and
sure,
and proper pronunciation of your last name.
Oh, if you do want to go there, it is Vanderjeugd. It means of the youth in Dutch. You can just call me Tim V for the rest of the conversation. It's probably
okay.
I am the director of sports marketing at Trek Bicycle, bike manufacturer company out of Wisconsin in the US. I am Belgian myself, so born in the heartland of road cycling, let's say. But at Trek, I am responsible for all of our teams. We have about 8 Trek Factory Racing level teams, which means, let's say, the top level of each discipline or sport. And those are athletes and teams where Trek has full control. Unlike other brands, we don't just give somebody a lot of bikes and a lot of cash. We feel that we have a better return on our investment when it comes to product development, marketing access, hospitality events, all kinds of things, than through the sponsorship model. So in a unique way. And then in parallel, our mountain bike teams are not individual teams either. We do run all 3 of them with the same management group, with the same staff, equipment, let's say, directors, vehicles, logistics. Everything is sort of seen as one big team, and therefore the partnership with HeadCheck across all disciplines works really well. So what it means in real life is that all of our staff on the ground has had the proper training through HeadCheck. And is able basically to do testing by the side of the track in case of a crash or something. Riders can also sometimes come back to the pit space, or it could be at the hotel, but we have people on site basically that are able to do an early assessment of a possible concussion and take appropriate response if needed. So there's a couple of levels of, let's say, who has access to or who can do a test. It's working really well. It really corresponds with our desire to, let's say, be in control of what happens to our athletes, and not leave anything open to any risks. Like we basically want to do every single thing we can do to support our riders.
That's great. So so I know you just do the road cyclist yourself, and you're in Belgium for a road race to watch your team there. But what teams are actually using? Which of your Trek teams are using HeadCheck, and what? And why did you say earlier you needed to use it earlier in the season to use your protocol?
Yeah. So at this point, it's the 3 Trek Factory Racing off-road teams. So the cross-country team, which competes over 6 or 7 World Cups a year. We have arguably the best team in the world, I think, when it comes to cross-country. We have the, based on the, let's say, 2018 standings, because the season is yet to start. We have the 1st-ranked woman, the 3rd-ranked woman, the 7th-ranked male, and the 1st-ranked under-23 woman. So a kick-ass team.
Yes,
and one of those riders, Emily Batty, did have like a serious crash a few years ago, for example, on a training day, and then at race day. I don't believe the concussion was properly assessed back then, or at least not the proper consequences was given to it. And then on race day, she had a crash, which, I mean, it's hindsight is perfect, right? But it is possible that a possible concussion caused that crash, maybe because her reactionary capacity was not where it should be. So it's hard to assess that right now, but it's definitely something that could have probably been dealt with in a better way. So that's our cross country team. Then we have our enduro team, which is the rock and roll sport of mountain biking. Basically, those people go out there on the mountain for a whole day. They complete stages in downhill stages, but they have to, just like rally car racing, have to get to the start of each race within a certain amount of time. They are fully responsible of their equipment. Everything gets a label, and they have to get through the weekend on the same equipment. So it's about balancing your bike and not going, too hard, because you need to keep your material intact for the whole weekend. So that team is where we had an incident 2 weeks ago. Katie Winton, who's I think 3rd ranked in the world, had a gnarly crash in race day. She was taken out of the race, so that was an immediate response. I mean, she just failed to start the next stage, so it's not like we needed to take the decision, let's say. But she was assessed by James, who's our caretaker, or soigneur is the proper word for it. and a concussion was diagnosed. So we've been following up with Katie over the last 2 weeks now. Harrison, I'm assuming that that kind of data and protocol has come to your attention as well over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in contact with James, and a couple things that we do here at HeadCheck is, we allow the athletes themselves, actually, if they're concussed, to things that are appropriate for them to track, and so I believe that until Katie goes back to sport, she's going to be self-collecting some information. Now, of course, she's not doing medical tests on herself. She's just simply tracking things like how she's feeling, how she slept, anything like that could really help a care provider. And so that information is obviously stored on her profile. And, we're also trying to get her access to, a health professional in her area, because I know that you guys travel quite a bit. And so it's always tough to always have the same person, but yeah, we're going to make sure that that information is available to the medical professional that is appropriate.
So that's great. Wow. So Tim, sorry, were you? So you talk about your downhill team stuff. Do you talk about your downhill team?
So that's the third team, let's say. Those are, let's say, the craziest of our mountain bikers. They literally jump off mountains. So we have 4 riders on that team. They're the newest team in the Trek Factory Racing umbrella, let's say. Young team, I think we have the youngest team in the world. Average age is, I think, under 21. But very ambitious. We actually just won important national level races in the US and in the UK yesterday with Charlie Harrison and Reese Wilson. But yeah, those are they go down the mountain fast. So it's very important for us to have the same kind of access to HeadCheck for them. It's different. They do one run a weekend, let's say, but they do it several times.
Yeah.
So we have a pit space at the bottom of the hill with people that can do concussion assessment if needed. Those are the 3 teams: cross country, enduro, and downhill. That's about it.
Well, I was going to ask you why it's important for non-contact sports such as wander and track athletes, but you've covered that with what you've been saying already. So I can see why your team definitely does. And but you were saying this just yesterday, even in the road race, there was an incident that that was a serious incident for the lead rider, number 1 rider, the defending champion.
So non-contact sport maybe is not what you think of when you think of concussions, but they are very much a real thing. Just yesterday, I was at the race as well at the Tour of Flanders, which is a 1-day race on the road circuit, a very famous race. And then the defending champion had a really, really gnarly crash. 50K into the race, was unconscious for a while on public television actually. Wow. Surrounded by his teammates, who you could see on their faces how scared they were of what they were seeing. There was a photographer sort of blocking the face of the rider at moments, so it wasn't that. I mean, it was not bad. It was not nice to look at. But anyway, he was out of the race. He was taken to a hospital, and the team. Just to be clarified, he's not on a Trek team. He rides for a French team. But his French team communicated shortly after that he had a severe concussion and he's going to be out for Paris-Roubaix, which is next Sunday, which is another really big race, and he's won it in the past as well, that rider. Absolute bummer for that team, absolute bummer for him. But they are a real thing, and you don't think of concussions when you see those, guys in Lycra on skinny tires and, that going super fast through the landscapes of France or so, but they certainly do happen. And you want to be doing everything you can, I think, as a team to prevent, not prevent, but to properly identify and take the right consequences of action.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the things, just to jump in here, one of the things that we talked about last year was there was a road race. I think it was in Belgium, Tim. You might have to correct me here, but there was a rider that went down, and visibly it appeared as though he had a concussion. And I mean, obviously you can't tell from just looking at someone, but it didn't look like they were fully there, and there was no assessment or removal from play or sport type test done.
Yeah.
And afterwards, the writers were going off on him, saying, "Wow, like he's just so brave, and good on him to keep going. It really shows how much of a warrior cyclists are." And I remember we spoke about it, and we were like, "This is horrible. I mean, how are in this day and age, how are people writing stories like that? I mean, it should almost be the opposite. It should say, hey man, like don't do that in the future. If there's any concern that you possibly have a head injury, don't continue, because there's kids watching this."
Yeah.
This
was a rider that actually ended up signing for the Trek team later. So he was on a different team at that point. And in race support is limited to mechanical support. So what happened there is that somebody on a motorbike who is responsible for providing spare wheels and not much more than that, checked up the guy's bike, assessed it as fine, it was rideable, and basically allowed him to get back on his bike and continue the descent, whereas he was clearly concussed, and he was going left to right on the road and almost caused other people to crash as well. So yeah, and you have a very fair point there, Harrison. There's still too much of that heroism of the old days where riders would cross Italy with a tube stretched to their backs, and that's no longer how we should be looking at these things. And if somebody's concussed, we need to be taking that very, very seriously and not give them a heads up for continuing to ride.
Yeah.
We always talk.
Sorry, go ahead there.
Well, I was going to say we always, one of the things that we always talk about here at HeadCheck is, education and awareness is just so important. And, the way that we approach it is anything that possibly has, the ability to increase the, awareness and education level of the general public on concussions is important. And, the way we approach it at HeadCheck is we're probably not the right people to be educating, and there are way better groups out there. And here in Canada, we have some fantastic non-for-profits that do this already. But education should be free, and everybody should have it. I think any sport that you're in where a concussion is possible, everybody should have an easy way to access that information, and the riders as well. I think. I mean, it happens in traditional sports here in North America with football and hockey where people just don't report it, and they know they have issues, but they don't want to tell their team. And I hope that through education and awareness, and we can get that out of sports here and also sports like cycling as well.
Yeah, and I hope like those things like this and other websites just get that info out there, so to everybody who can more times the info gets out there, the more prevalent it is, so people actually listen to it and abide by recommendations.
So it was great to have HeadCheck and Harrison included in our team camp in Spain that we had in February, where all the riders were present, and basically introduce what HeadCheck does and provide more information about concussions. And you could see, Harrison, you can confirm that the riders were very intrigued by it. They had a lot of questions, and I think, Harrison, you also I think you told me afterwards at night at the bar that you asked the riders how many concussions they've had, or at least how many diagnosed versus undiagnosed ones. Maybe you can tell Nick about that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, so the setup of our trek is pretty cool. I mean, we were pretty blown away by it. Basically, we flew overnight to Barcelona and then Valencia, and then we rented a car and drove to an undisclosed location in the mountains where Trek had leased out this almost castle, and they brought in all their riders, they brought in sponsors, they brought in team staff, and it was really cool. And we got the opportunity to come there, and one of the things that we do at HeadCheck is we actually have our own medical professionals, and we brought one of our individuals along, and he was tasked with essentially doing the baseline screens for these athletes. And so, obviously baselines, there's definitely a value to them when you have a medical professional. And so we felt that it was important for them to have that information. And, part of that experience is really asking them, and unfortunately people can just say whatever they want, but, have you ever had a diagnosed concussion? How long ago was it? Have you ever had any undiagnosed concussions? And one of the things that we found is just simply, maybe it's a mountain biking thing, but the number of undiagnosed concussions that people thought they had was astronomical. And I think that's really a reflection of the fact that maybe documenting and assessing and going to the doctor and seeing the appropriate medical staff for concussions in mountain biking just isn't there yet. And it really blew us away. But I think it was really cool just meeting all the athletes and kind of hearing their stories, and everybody seemed to really care about it, and a lot of times that's not the case. And so for us, that was a reflection of the fact that this was definitely the right thing to do, and it's definitely needed in downhill and in the other sports as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just going to ask you, which of the three sports are using HeadCheck? Which of the three teams do you think is most susceptible to concussion? Which team do you think will use HeadCheck the most, or which team do you anticipate would be find it most useful?
Well, I'm hoping we'll need HeadCheck almost no time. So
Never,
not at all. Yeah.
Hopefully none.
Yeah, that would be
hopefully none.
The right number, but we're already at one, so it's hard to say if the gravity teams, enduro and downhill, are going to need it more than cross country. That would be like my inkling, but cross country can take gnarly crashes as well. I mean, they it's getting more and more technical on their side as well. With man-made obstacles versus just trails. There's getting more and more technical stuff in there. I'm not sure. I hope again that nobody's going to need.
How long are the enduro races?
The enduro races are usually 7 to 10 stages spread over 1 or 2 days.
Okay.
So they're probably out there for the longest. Downhill runs are, between 2.5 and 5.5 minutes.
Okay.
That's race run, but they do a lot of practice runs at 95% or 97% of speed. So it's pretty dangerous as well. And in cross country, one of their races takes an hour and a half usually. But they're out there a lot as well. So it's hard to see.
I just can't really tell which one I would think would be a higher risk. And in traditional sports we have incident rates, right? And there's really good researchers out there that are quantifying the number of concussions per athlete exposures, and so that gives you a really if you want to call it, a power rankings of risk for concussion. And I don't think we have that in cycling yet, and I think that would be some great research for people to look into. But the experience I have is I've gone downhill mountain biking once here at I went to Whistler and rented a pass and a really expensive bike, and within 5 minutes I think I gave myself a concussion. So I think they're all dangerous sports, if you want to say that, and these are the best people in the world that are riding these bikes, but it still is dangerous. And one of the takeaways that I had from my conversations with the riders was, sometimes it's not like they're wiping out or they're taking a turn wrong. It's they're racing and then they might bump somebody, or they might there might be some grappling as they head towards the line. And sometimes that's something that we forget about, that when you're out there as a recreational cyclist, you're probably not doing that, and these folks are.
Yeah, sure. So actually, on these one night, does Christian Tim does Trek or Trek Factor Racing, does it have a concussion protocol for all teams, or and does UCI for Union Cycliste International? I'll let you say that, Tim. Union Cycliste International, that's the governing body of cycling. Go ahead, sorry.
No, I don't think there's something in place on the mountain bike side, neither on the road side. inside our road team, we have medical professionals that use international standards for concussion identification. They are currently not partnered with HeadCheck. That's maybe something for the future, Harrison. But I mean, what is true is definitely true is that those people are very concerned with concussion as well. So that's definitely something that is tangible and that's out there. But the sport still has a couple of steps to take to make it really, across the board, sensitive to concussion protocol.
Right. And UCI doesn't have that? UCI has no concussion at all?
I don't believe so. No.
And that was last question. Just sort of how you guys, who reached out to who and to whom, and how does HeadCheck and Track Factory Racing partnership developed?
So we have a British gentleman who's a soigneur, or like a caretaker on our enduro team. His name is James. He is an avid cyclist himself. Has had a fair bit of concussions himself as a gravity downhill rider, let's say. And he's somebody that, like, I love the guy. He's just a very, very charismatic, really nice guy. Riders just love having him at the events, at the races. And James is somebody that reads up a lot about what's going on in the world of concussions. He's just somebody. He's somebody that wants to help people. He's always doing whatever he can to help people. So he's the one that approached me about it. And then he had done his research and had come up with HeadCheck as like the reference for us to look into. And then Harris and I got on a call, and then we very quickly realized the potential of this partnership. And it didn't take us very long, right, Harrison, to come to an agreement about what was next for us?
No, it didn't take very long, but I did book my flights to Spain about the night before. So
yeah, that's true.
But I think I think James reached out to us. It was honestly probably about a year and a half ago. And I know that at that point he was doing research on the different systems out there, and we were just one of them. And we had a couple video calls back and forth, product demos, all this kind of stuff. And we're very excited when he let us know that he was going to pass it along to Tim. And I think our experience with the whole team has been, this is something that's been supported from the top down. And I think if we're making the difference that we think we are, we hope that it continues not only with Trek but with other partners as well.
That's great. And so I just want to thank you both for being on my podcast, and I hope you got me note about it, that once we finish recording, I'll like to talk after this. But for now, that's the end of the podcast. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you think you'd like to talk about or mention about concussion or cycling or injury?
No, all good on my end. Thank you very much for having us on the podcast.
Great. Thank you so much.
Nick, appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Harrison. Thank you very much to Tim and Harrison for an excellent chat. And congratulations to Trek for such forward thinking in addressing concussions. And good luck to all the racing teams this year. Thank you all for listening. And please rate and review this podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Google Play Music, Stitcher, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, please visit my webpage at www.concussiontalk.com. Thank you again, and I hope you drop by my website to check out my blogs and my other podcasts, including my own bike podcast in which I talk about my bike trip across Canada for 66 days in 2002. As always, music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.